Taylor Sheridan has one more chapter of the Dutton family left to tell. And it's the one fans have been waiting 3 years for. Is 1944 really landing before the end of this year? Has filming for this show even started yet? And what does a World War II-era Dutton story have to do with Beth and Rip fighting for their lives in Texas right now? We're digging into everything confirmed about Yellowstone 1944 and connecting it to the Dutton family saga still unfolding today. Quick thing before we dive in. If you're new to this channel, I'm glad you found us. We track every corner of the Yellowstone universe, and we only bring you what's actually been reported and confirmed. If that's useful to you, I'd really appreciate it if you considered subscribing. It costs nothing, and it helps this channel keep doing this kind of deep dive. Alright, let's get into it. First, let's ground ourselves in where the Dutton timeline actually stands right now. The Yellowstone franchise has expanded into a full family tree of shows. There's 1883, which ran for one season back in 2021 and 2022. There's 1923, which ran 2 8-episode seasons on Paramount+, wrapping up its story between December of 2022 and April of 2025. There's Marshals, following Case Dutton, which launched in 2026. And there's Dutton Ranch, following Beth and Rip, which is currently airing its first season right now, in 2026. 1944 has been sitting in the wings this entire time, announced all the way back in February of 2023, positioned to be the bridge between 1923 and the original Yellowstone. Now let's talk about where 1923 actually left off, because it matters a lot for what 1944 could become. By the end of that series, Spencer Dutton, played by Brandon Sklenar, was still alive. His wife, Alexandra, was not. She died from complications after childbirth in the final episodes, a genuinely brutal ending for that couple's storyline. That leaves Spencer, as the surviving Dutton heir, heading into the next chapter of this family's history, raising a child alone in the aftermath of enormous loss. And here's a detail worth sitting with. Multiple entertainment outlets have reported that Spencer and Alexandra are widely believed to be the parents of John Dutton II, meaning Spencer isn't just a side character from a completed prequel. He's likely a direct link in the bloodline that eventually leads to John Dutton III, the man we all watched run the ranch in the flagship series. Now that part hasn't been officially confirmed by Paramount or Sheridan himself, but it's the connective tissue that's kept fans convinced 1944 isn't optional viewing. It's the show that could finally answer where this family's modern story actually starts. So now let's talk about where things stand today, in the present timeline, because this is where the title of this video comes in. Beth Dutton and Rip Wheeler are not living in Montana anymore. If you've watched the ending of Yellowstone, you know Case and Beth made the decision to sell the original Dutton Ranch to Chief Rainwater and the Broken Rock Reservation. That decision ended the Dutton family's ownership of the land that gave this entire franchise its name. Beth and Rip initially settled on a smaller ranch in Dillon, Montana, hoping for a quiet life with their adopted son, Carter. But a fire took that property from them too. So they picked up and moved to South Texas, into the fictional town of Rio Paloma, roughly an hour from the border. There they bought a 5,000-acre property called the Edwards Ranch, home to 175 head of Black Angus cattle, and renamed it Dutton Ranch. Rip found out about the property through Walker, a former ranch hand from the original Yellowstone series. That new chapter premiered on Paramount Plus on May 15, 2026, with new episodes releasing weekly on Fridays. It quickly turned into a full-blown range war, with Beth and Rip up against the Jackson family, who run a rival operation called 10 Petal Ranch. Now here's where I want to draw the actual connection this video promised you, and I want to be upfront about what's confirmed and what isn't. There is no officially announced storyline crossover between 1944 and Dutton Ranch. Paramount hasn't said Spencer's story will directly intersect with Beth and Rip's present-day fight, but there is a real traceable thread running underneath both of these shows, and it's about land. Every Dutton story, going all the way back to 1883, is ultimately about who holds onto Montana ground and who's forced to let it go. Spencer Dutton inherited the responsibility of building that legacy back up after his family survived one of the bloodiest chapters in the franchise's history. Generations later, that same legacy is the reason the original ranch existed for John Dutton III to fight for and ultimately the reason he chose to give it up entirely, which is exactly what pushed Beth and Rip out of Montana in the first place. In other words, 1944 isn't just a prequel for the sake of nostalgia. If it delivers on what fans expect, it's the show that explains how the Dutton family rebuilt what they had after nearly losing everything in the 1920s, the very foundation that later collapsed by the time we reached Dutton Ranch. Spencer's war isn't Beth and Rip's war, but it's the same land, the same bloodline, the same pattern of Duttons fighting to hold on to something the modern world keeps trying to take from them. That's the through line connecting a story set in 1944 to a story airing on your screen this summer. Now let's get into what's actually confirmed about 1944 itself, because there's less certainty here than fans might expect. According to industry insider Matt Webb-Midovich, who runs the entertainment newsletter Matt's Inside Line, he reported earlier this year that he had been assured 1944 is still actively in development at Paramount. That same report indicated the show was aiming for a late 2026 release window. But here's the catch, and it's an important one. As of that same report, filming for 1944 had not yet begun. That's a real problem if you compare it to how these prequels have actually been made in the past. 1923 took roughly a year and a half between wrapping production and reaching audiences for its second season. If 1944 genuinely hasn't started filming yet, a release before the end of 2026 would be an unusually fast turnaround for this franchise. That doesn't mean it's impossible. Paramount has plenty of incentive to move quickly, but it's worth staying skeptical of a hard late 2026 date until there's an actual trailer, a confirmed cast list, or a filming start date on record. Right now, none of those three things exist publicly. No official synopsis, no confirmed casting beyond speculation, no start of production announcement, just a single insider report saying the project is alive and the target is late this year. So why does the uncertainty around 1944 matter so much to fans right now? Because look at what's happening around it. The Yellowstone franchise as a whole is having one of its strongest years ever. Dutton Ranch's first season, currently airing, was renewed for a second season before its first season had even finished, with Benjamin Cavill stepping in as the new showrunner following Chad Feehan's departure just 3 weeks before the premiere. Marshals, following Case Dutton, also launched in 2026 and became a genuine hit for the network airing it. This is a franchise expanding on multiple fronts at once, in the present day and in the past. 1944 is the one piece of that expansion that's been publicly promised the longest and delivered the least information about. It was announced in February of 2023. We are now well into 2026, and the most concrete thing we can say about it is that one well-connected insider believes it's still moving forward, aiming for the back half of this year. That's not nothing. But it's also not a trailer, and it's not a premiere date on a calendar. So here's where that leaves us. If 1944 does land before the end of 2026, it arrives at a moment when the Dutton name is already dominating television across 3 different timelines at once. Casey's story is airing, Beth and Rip's story is airing, and the story of how this family clawed its way back from near-total collapse in the 1920s would finally get its follow-up, closing the gap between Spencer Dutton's Montana and the Montana his descendants eventually lost. If that timeline holds, 1944 wouldn't just be another prequel. It would be the missing hinge connecting everything we've watched this family go through, from the frontier all the way to a rebuilt ranch in South Texas. So here's what I want to know from you. Do you think 1944 actually makes it to screens before the end of this year, given that filming hasn't started yet? Do you think Spencer Dutton is really the direct ancestor tying this whole family tree together? And now that Beth and Rip are building something new in Texas, do you think the Dutton legacy is strong enough to survive one more generation of losing everything and starting over? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'll be back the moment there's an actual official update on 1944, whether that's a trailer, a cast announcement, or a confirmed filming start. If you don't want to miss that video, subscribing and turning on notifications is the easiest way to make sure you catch it the moment it drops. Until then, keep an eye on Rio Paloma. That range war isn't finished yet, and neither is this family's story.